Lost in the Farmer's Market Garden Shorts, where today we're talking about this lovely specimen here. Now, this is one of the garden plants that it took us a while to get to. But there's so many plants in so little time. Now, what are you looking at? Well, from the leaves, I'm just going to tell you, no, it's not marijuana. So get that dirty thought out of your mind. This is Cleome Hassleriana. You don't hassle the Cleomes. But anyway, the variety is Sparkler Blush, which, I mean, it's pretty. And the common name is just Cleome. I mean, that's what I've known it as for forever. But it's an interesting plant nonetheless. And actually, we got a good assortment here. Flowers, new, opening, seed pods, oh yeah. Now, it's in the family Cleomeaceae, so it's in its own family name for itself, which is kind of cool. Its name is actually derived from a mustard-like plant that's very similar looking. However, the problem is no source indicates what that plant was. Okay, that's a bit weird in my opinion, but you do you or whatever. It is originally, well, beyond that, I should point out it is originally from South America. Specifically, it is endemic to Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay, and southeast Brazil. I forgot to mention, though, the Hassleriana name, which is oddly specific, is actually from Emily Hassler, who was born in 1864 and died in 1937, a Swiss botanist and plant collector. Okay. When you get those weird names that seem a bit too much like a name, it probably is someone's name. Botany and horticulture are funny like that. Now, in zones 10 through 11, it is a hardy perennial. In 9 through 1, it is considered an annual. It prefers a soil pH between 6 and 7. Its exposure is full sun or partial sun, and this one was out in full sun, and look at how fabulous it's doing. Now, this came from a 4-cell pack. So I put it in there, and they're doing just fine. And in fact, they're side branching, which is kind of impressive. Now, its height can be up to 3 feet, which I could believe. And its width can be up to 3 feet, and that's probably from the side branching, which I'm okay with. Other names for this plant are spider flower, spider plant, pink queen, and grandfather's whiskers. Oh yeah, I'm not seeing that last one, but spider flower comes from the fact that when the flowers are unfurling, it looks like the abdomen of a spider, and the little pistils and stamens look like the legs, which is fine. I've heard it called spider flower more than any of that other stuff. So, it is actually closely related to the cabbage family, or the Brassicaceae, which is interesting, but not surprising, considering that at least 2 relatives, Cleome gynandra and Cleome cerulata, are both fully edible. And in fact, it is said by some folks, even though I have not verified this myself, that this is edible, but the leaves are a bit on the bitter side, and therefore they're edible, but maybe as a pot herb. And the seed pods are edible, and the seeds may be grindable up into some kind of porridge and or mush and or flour. Whatever. Good thing it produces so darn many of them, because otherwise it might be a problem. Now, what's interesting about this plant, or rather its family, is that the Cleomeaceae family contains a few species that show the evolution from C3 to C4 photosynthesis. Now, for those of you who don't know photosynthesis, C3 plants, or C3 photosynthesis plants, actually originated in the Mesozoic and Paleozoic eras. They're actually more adapted to temperate climates and less hot climates and places where there's reasonable amounts of groundwater. However, C4 plants can handle the hot stuff, and C4 photosynthesis, a good example of seeing C4 photosynthesis would be in jade plants. Those things do crassulacean acid metabolism. And what they'll do is they'll store the CO2 that they capture and then process it for photosynthesis at night, which is an adaptation to allow them to withstand hot temperatures and waste as little moisture and or gases as possible. Nature be crazy, but survivable. Now, let's talk about this plant in detail. Cleomes are an interesting plant that was very popular around the Victorian era And then they went out of popularity, and now they've been back for the last, at least 25, 30 years. There's new forms, new shapes, ones that just don't take over your garden. Now, the one thing you have to watch out for is these seed pods. A lot of the seeds are viable, and they will self-sow themselves. And amazingly, if they appear in lawns, they'll make themselves short enough to avoid the mower blades and still produce seed and flowers. So Cleomes can be a problem. And in some varieties, they have thorny protrusions along the stems as an anti-grazing measure, so they can be problematic for you too. However, the flowers are totally worth it, and the pollinators they attract are totally worth it. So there is a subtle trade-off in growing these plants. Now, some varieties are bloody huge. This one, my numbers for height and width were for this species specifically, though there are ones that get bigger, if you can imagine that. I mean, 3 feet should be enough, but there are ones that get bigger, and if you snip off the flowering tips up here, they'll side shoot and you'll get more. Or they'll just keep boop, 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 you know, and that's what they do. Now, in a pot like this, regular potting soil, nothing fancy. I would recommend regular fertilizer for their own benefit, regular water. They're not dramatic wilters, but you'll know. They're definitely not like impatiens, which will wilt the moment anything dry happens. So there's that. Consequently, don't tell too much dry humor in the garden, the impatiens will wilt. But that's Cleomes in a nutshell for you folks. So, if you have any thoughts on growing Cleomes, any tips or tricks, or if you've eaten Cleome Hassleriana, or the type you normally buy at the garden center, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. You can leave a comment in the comment section at your leisure. And if you like this video, please hit like. If you haven't already, please subscribe. It helps the channel. Also, in the video description down at the bottom, you will see a link to our forage blog where you can see forage plants, wild plants, weeds, quote-unquote, herbicide companies love to call them that you can eat or use medicinally, and how to go about doing that. So, with that said, this is Cleomes, and as always, folks, thank you for watching, and keep them growing.